Usually we do one segment with the Bear, Chris Fallica from Fox Sports and the Bear Bets podcast, but he is feisty this morning, so we're going to do more than one with him. Chris Fallica joins us now. How you doing, sir?
I'm well. How are you? I'm not necessarily feisty.
Oh, okay. I thought you're feisty.
I wouldn't say I'm feisty. I think you're the feisty one.
I'm not feisty. You're feisty. That's a good put down right there. You're obviously, I would imagine that's a hotel that you're in right now. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is a lovely Conrad Hotel in Indianapolis. I'm here for the Michigan-Iowa Big Ten championship game. I have a nice little shrimp cocktail fest at St. Elmo tonight. So good way to end the pre-bowl season here with my first year with Fox.
You love St. Elmo. I've heard you talk about it before.
Do.
Let me, okay, so before we get into your thoughts on the game that you guys will be covering and the entire championship week landscape, let us talk about something that you are somewhat passionate about. I think that's a fair analysis, which is you really are in the camp. I don't want to mischaracterize it, but I think you lean to the camp of the four best teams ought to be there, and there should be a scenario where FSU with a win does not get it. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I think there are quite a number of people out there who feel that way. And look, Boo Corrigan has said it all along. It's like the committee is tasked with putting the best four teams in the playoff. There's nothing that says deserving. Now, we all know in the past they have erred on the side of putting like the teams that have had kind of the best season and deserve to get there. And also and he brought it up again, in their bylaws, criteria, whatever you want to call them, it specifically indicates player availability is something that it should come into play. And if you use that combination of best and player availability, like I don't know how anybody could sit there and say that this Florida State team with Rodemaker at quarterback is one of the best four teams in the country. People are, it's at least right now, people are trying to make the correlation between what Ohio State did in 2014 with Cardell Jones. We'll see if Florida State goes out Saturday night with Rodemaker and that team that they have and beats Louisville 59-0 like Ohio State did over Wisconsin. Sure, then they proved it on the field. But I think there was this thing also, even with Jordan Travis, like there were a school of thought that they're really not. I mean, they didn't power rate very highly. I mean, they've won all their games, and credit to them for doing that. I just don't think they're one of the best four teams. Now, do I think the committee will kind of take the humane way out and say, okay, I think there is a subliminal human element of this where they will say, can we really leave a team that's 13-0 and won the ACC out? Probably not. But remember, the ACC is the weakest Power 5 league. They're the weakest champ. And really the resume of Florida State. The resume of Florida State is what they did last week against Florida and what they do tomorrow against Louisville, because anything that they did with Jordan Travis really shouldn't be accounted for, because that's not the team that they're going to take into the playoff. And I was talking with Chris Andrews about like projected lines, and you're looking at a 15-point spread potentially against Georgia, a 12-point spread potentially against Michigan. And I get back to deserving. Deserving has gotten us Alabama, Michigan State, Alabama, Cincinnati, Oklahoma, LSU, like Notre Dame, Alabama. That's what deserving has gotten us. Awful semifinal games. So here's an opportunity for the committee to kind of use their criteria and say, hey, you know what? If we were truly looking for the best four, maybe Florida State isn't one of them. But I do think, like I said, I do think that they ultimately will put them in.
Yeah. Two things. One, you're an awful human being for having this opinion. Two,
I'm a lawful human being for a lot of it.
No. As I've said all week, I totally understand both sides of the argument. I happen to lean though to because you're right about. Look, those of us who bet, we know what the lines are going to be. We know what's happened in these lopsided semis. It ain't good television. It's not great football. But you can't tell kids who have shown up for a college football season with a Power 5 schedule, and they've beaten everybody you've placed in front of them, and then, yes, their quarterback does go down, but there is precedent, right, with Cardale Jones. And I said, hypothetically, if this happened to Alabama, would they knock them out? No. And I get what you're saying about power ratings. You just can't tell these kids they can't be in it. You just can't. And as you said, it's not going to happen. They're going to be in if they win. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately that will be the way it shakes down. Now, Louisville can do the committee in Texas and whomever else a favor if they can get the win on Saturday night. We'll see if that numbers come down some more. There's some questions about Tate Rodemaker's availability, and I think I think he's still going to play. But the thing with Florida is, like the third string kid, Glenn, he broke his finger, I think, earlier in the year, and that's the only reason he's not number 2 right now. So. And the people that I've been talking to, like even if Rodemaker isn't able to play or he doesn't pass concussion or whatever the situation is, I don't think they view that as a downgrade if the freshman does have to come in and play.
Okay, let's start with the Pac-12 title game tonight here in Vegas, where Oregon is now. I mean, they've gotten to 10. Hosting, well, actually not hosting, but playing Washington for the Pac-12 championship. Obviously, UW is undefeated. They almost, the disrespect being they're an undefeated team that's in the situation where they have to win or they're out. 9.5 is the consensus number. Do you feel that this number is correct? Do you think Penix is hurt? And do you think Oregon will get to a place in this game where they play it, as Bud Elliott said yesterday on the show from 24/7 Sports, in a way that will try to hoist Nix to the Heisman?
Yes, I do. I totally agree with Bud on that. And I think the number is right just based on the trajectory of those teams since the Washington win in Seattle over Oregon earlier. I think you and I and a bunch of people have talked about it. Like we felt coming out of that game that if they played again, I would happily lay a touchdown with Oregon in that game. And the rumor about Penix's ribs being injured, other things, he clearly has not looked right. That they've been begging to get beat the last couple of weeks, and I do think there'll be an Oregon situation here where they do try and put up big numbers for Bo Nix. I know Jeff Schwartz, who I was talking about on the podcast yesterday, that he thinks Bo Nix being in the running game is going to be a big part of the offense in this game, something that they really haven't shown much of this year. But with Nix and Bucky Irving and Tez Johnson, I think their offense is going to put up a bunch of points. And I just don't know if UW, with the way Penix has been playing, if they're going to be able to come back. Like it's obvious to everybody something's going on. I mean, they got like guys standing next to him, making sure people don't bump into him. So clearly something up, and it's a shame that they have an injury as well at the position for their biggest game of the year. They've had a great year, but I do like, if I did have to, I don't want to have to lay 9.5 here. I got enough liability and futures on Oregon right now where I don't need to play this game. I mean, I actually took Washington 10 days ago in the look ahead at +7 because I didn't think the number would get higher than that, and clearly I was wrong with my forecast of the line. So I'm in a good position here with this game, but I'm not going to play it. If I didn't have a position, I probably would lay the 9.5.
Anything in the other game tonight? Conference USA Championship, Liberty and New Mexico State. Anything in that game?
Liberty's covered these numbers all year. I've faded Liberty a couple of times, and I've been on the wrong side of that. I guess I would still lean towards maybe taking New Mexico State. This is a team that went to Jordan-Hare a couple of weeks ago and dominated Auburn. Why can't they go to Liberty and hang around and be close? I haven't played it, but if you're just looking for a late night fix to watch a game with a little action, I'd take Jerry Kill and the boys there plus the 11. That's a lot of points.
All right, what's your single favorite play tomorrow?
I do like UNLV plus the points in that game. I think the Rebels all year long have been the best team in that league, and I think there's kind of a bad mouthing going on right now that San Jose State beat them last week. San Jose State should be in the game. UNLV shouldn't. This isn't a great Boise team. Obviously, they've responded since Eddie Avalos was fired, and they've been much better since then. But I think over the course of the year, UNLV has been better. I think the defense with Barry Odom, I think they'll do a good enough job against that Boise State running game. And I think they're going to win that game. It's been a very special season for Odom and that bunch. And I think as a college football fan, I think it'd be a great story, and I hope they do win. But I do like them tomorrow in that Mountain West game. The
game that you're covering, the Michigan-Iowa Big Ten Championship, this is so interesting. There's so many ways to parse this in terms of what could be Iowa's ineptitude in this game. Is there a specific way you're betting this game, even if not the side or total?
I bet the total.
You did?
I grabbed it under 35.5. And I just don't think it's going to be very plausible to see Iowa score more than 7 points at most. And maybe they get a turnover, maybe they get a big return, maybe they PI their way down the field somehow with the worst passing offense in the country. But I also don't know, on the other hand, like how much. Maybe we see a Michigan game plan, kind of like what they did against Penn State, running the ball basically every play in the second half, or that drive last week against Ohio State where they relied on the running game. Like, I could see this being like a 27-7 type of game, maybe 30 to something like that. I did actually bet Michigan at the Open at 21.5, assuming it was going to go up. It hasn't gone up a ton. So I do have the Michigan 21.5 that I still do feel good about. But I think this is a dead under game.
Chris Fallica, kind enough to join us for a second segment, the Bear Bets Pod, pro and college football versions out now. College on Thursday, pros on Fridays. We'll get more thoughts from him on these other championship week games and the scenario that would be the hardest for the committee to sift through. What does he think that would be, and how would he vote on it? That's next. Numbers Game, VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Okay, and this is the last one, and I'll go back to Fallica because there's a whole bunch of these still. Summer Hutchinson, where is there a plus 475 for Dak MVP? DraftKings, correct?
Yep.
That was DraftKings, sir. Yep. Plus 475, as well as he's playing, seems a little low. Yes?
Yeah.
Let's bring in Chris Fallica, the Bear, from the Bear Bets Pod, of course, at Fox Sports. That feels a little bit low to you too, Chris? Plus 475?
It does. He's been great, obviously, the last 6 weeks or so of the year. And ultimately, it's going to come down to what they do in the division. I don't think he can win if they don't win the division. And the same, we've talked about this as well with Purdy, with you and Will and I when we go back and forth on text. Like, I almost think the way you play that game with the Eagles and the Niners on Sunday is just play Purdy to win MVP.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think if Purdy wins that, if they win that game tomorrow, his price, or Sunday rather, his price is going to just drop like a rock.
I agree.
And then maybe the Eagles lose to the Cowboys, and then you're kind of looking at maybe two teams that are going to have the same record. And the Niners ultimately won it with that one seed. And I think, like Drew has talked about it with the quarterback or the one seed maybe getting. Like, I think if you're going to play Purdy, you got to do it before Sunday.
That is correct. I agree with that. By the way, you have a Jaden Daniels Heisman ticket, so you're talking through that lens. People should know that. Full disclosure. You really, how confident do you feel about this, or do you really not very? Because you think that, getting back to the Bo Nix thing tonight, because we've all seen Matt Brown was talking about earlier, we've all seen the comparisons. If you run the numbers, there is no comparison, especially like air yards, right? Like, Bo Nix does not throw the ball downfield. Right. If he does that in a standalone game tonight.
Bubble screen Bo is what
Bubble screen Bo. That's right. Bubble screen Bo. So, but if we see that, all it takes is one game tonight in a standalone. I know Liberty's playing too, but generally a standalone game. Doesn't that, it completely is going to skew this, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah,
and I was talking about this with Joel Klatt this morning. Like, I am not a voter, so don't think I'm sabotaging a vote or anything. Like, I just think if you look at his numbers and don't give him the award, it's like, what are we doing? Like,
what are we doing?
He's had more total yards than 80 teams in the country. He's accounted for more touchdowns than 98 teams in the country. Like, he's having a historic season. If Neighbors catches a ball that went off of his hands in the end zone against Ole Miss, we're not having this conversation, because I think a 10-2 LSU will be viewed differently than a 9-3 LSU. But it gets back to an argument, and this was Joel's point about, he goes, can I really give the award for most outstanding player in college football to someone who this team lost their three biggest games? And that's what the whole definition of outstanding comes down to. Like, is outstanding mean outstanding statistics, outstanding leadership, outstanding team season, combination of the both, which is why I think if Bo Nix goes out tonight and has a great game, or even just a good game, and Oregon wins and they win the Pac-12 and are going to the playoff, he's probably going to win this award. And what I hate about this is, while I'm sitting here propping up Daniel saying I think statistically it's not even close, it's not a debate, he should win in a landslide. It's like people interpret that as, oh, you hate Bo Nix, you don't think he should win, he's terrible. No, that's not it at all. I just think that Daniels has had the better year. The irony in all this is is you got Daniels, who started in the Pac-12 at Arizona State, now in the SEC at LSU, and you got Nix, who started at Auburn in the SEC, was benched, and wound up transferring to Oregon and the Pac-12. And that's what the battle comes down to.
Yeah, I object to, there's two things that are the anti-Daniels crap, which is they lost 3 games, and oh, by the way, he had so many more possessions and opportunities because his defense sucks. It's like you can't have all of those things as detractors.
Right.
It's like, come on, man. He couldn't control the 3 because his defense is terrible, and yet you're killing him for having more opportunities and taking advantage of them. It's ridiculous. Okay, the scenario that would cause the most havoc, and how would you navigate it?
It's Alabama winning, because Alabama winning and all the other favorites winning. Because then you're basically saying, in that scenario, the only team I would think for sure that would be in would be Michigan. Because then you'd have a 12-1 SEC champion Alabama, a 12-1 Georgia, who's been number 1 all year, 2-time defending champion, non-champion. You'd have Oregon, a 12-1 Pac-12 champion. You'd have a 13-0 Florida State without starting quarterback, and you'd have a 12-1 Big 12 champion Texas. Like, in that scenario, there's no way you can take Alabama and not take Texas. There have been 2 games this year where a top 10 team lost on their home field. One was Alabama losing at home to Texas, and the other one was Michigan going to Penn State and winning. So, in that scenario, I think Texas absolutely has to be in, because I think the SEC champion will absolutely be, and I think the committee will 100% want to put the SEC champion in, and they should be. So I think in that scenario, you get Michigan, Alabama, Texas, and then do you take Georgia? Do you knock them all the way out? Like we talked about, this human element before, 28 game winning streak or whatever,
yeah.
2-time reigning national champ. You're going to knock them out, the team that you think is the best team. I think in that scenario, the SEC might get 2, and that's where you could get the 13-0 Florida State, where you can maybe put them up against Georgia or Alabama, and say, okay, these other teams are unequivocally better than Florida State, and that's where they can get around the 13-0 without your starting quarterback. But if you're an Oregon fan, you are rooting so hard for Georgia, because you do not want this scenario to even have a thought of coming into play, where maybe Texas could jump you because the Alabama-Texas game gets thrust into a greater light.
No doubt about that. All right, of the 6 games we didn't touch upon, I'm going to cherry pick one. I'll just make it the Louisville-Florida State ACC championship, with Florida State a 2.5-point favorite here. Now actually 1.5. Yeah. How do you think this goes? Would you bet this game?
I'm beginning to think more and more that Louisville does win this game. I think you need to, if you take your position, whatever it is on Florida State, should they be in, should they be not, and you look at both of those games last week, Louisville, in that game against Kentucky, they outgained them by 125, 130 yards, I think, or whatever it was. They had a kickoff return against them for a touchdown. They turned the ball over twice deep inside their own territory that resulted in points for Kentucky. They had a winning box score outside of the turnovers. You look at Florida State, they had 240 yards, less than 4 yards of play, 4 of 15 or whatever it was on third down. They really only won the game because Florida just completely combusted with some terrible personal foul penalties and just some awful play. I think if you look at it rationally, and the way Jeff Brom has schemed his teams up in a position against some of these top 5, top 10 teams that they faced, and Plummer doesn't turn the ball over like he did, I think it's hard for me to not like Louisville pulling the minor upset here.
Chris, enjoy St. Elmo tonight, man. I know you will.
We will. We'll get those nasal passages cleaned out. Looking forward to Dr. Bob and Jason, see what they got on slate for us here.
My man, Chris Fallica, the Bear Bets Pod, college and pro football.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.